She grabbed my hand in front of 40 people I had never met, laced her fingers through mine like we had done it 1,000 times, and whispered against my ear, "Please, don't ruin this for me." I had no idea who she was pretending I was. I only knew that 30 seconds earlier, I had been standing alone by a shrimp cocktail table wondering how fast I could leave a company holiday party without anybody noticing. My name is Ethan Cole. I am 29, and until that night, I could not have told you one useful thing about Priya Nair besides the fact that she worked 2 cubicles down from me in claims processing and always smelled faintly like cinnamon. We were not friends. We were not enemies. We were 2 people who nodded at each other in the break room and occasionally argued in emails about whose turn it was to submit the monthly report. That was the entire relationship. Then December happened. Rayfield Insurance threw one holiday party a year, and it was always the same tired affair. Rented ballroom, bad DJ, a manager giving a speech nobody listened to, and just enough open bar to make people say things they would regret by January. I only went because attendance was quietly mandatory, the kind of mandatory where nobody says the word but everybody understands the consequences of skipping it. I had a plate of shrimp in one hand and an exit strategy already forming in my head when Priya appeared beside me like she had been launched out of a cannon. She did not say hello. She did not ease into it. She grabbed my free hand, stepped in close enough that her shoulder pressed against my arm, and smiled at someone behind me like the 2 of us had just shared an inside joke. "There you are, babe," she said, loud enough to carry. I was looking everywhere. I turned my head slowly, shrimp still halfway to my mouth, and stared at her. She was not looking at me. She was looking past me, at a tall man in an expensive coat who was walking toward us with the kind of confidence that only comes from never once being told no. That was when she leaned in and said the line that started the whole mess. "Don't ruin this for me." I set the shrimp down, not because I had made a decision, because my hands needed something to do besides shake. "Okay," I said quietly, which felt like the only word small enough to fit through the panic in my throat. "What exactly am I not ruining?" She squeezed my hand hard enough to bruise. "Just follow my lead," she whispered. "Please." The man in the coat arrived a second later, and up close I understood immediately why Priya's whole posture had changed. His name, I would learn later, was Connor Wade. Regional director, one office over, the kind of guy who used the word synergy without irony. He looked at Priya the way men look at something they already consider theirs, and then he looked at me the way men look at furniture blocking their path. "Priya," he said, smooth as poured syrup, "I didn't know you were seeing anyone." "No," Priya said, and rested her head against my shoulder like it was the most natural motion in the world. "This is Ethan." Connor extended a hand and gripped mine a little too firmly, the kind of handshake that is really a small aggressive negotiation. "Ethan," he repeated, tasting the name like he was deciding whether to believe it. "How long have you 2 been together?" I opened my mouth with no plan whatsoever, and Priya answered before a single sound came out of me. "Almost 3 months, she said smoothly. "We're keeping it quiet at work. You know how people talk." "Sure," Connor said, and something behind his eyes went cold and calculating. "Cute." He stayed another 10 seconds, long enough to make it clear he did not believe a word of it, and then he wandered off toward the bar without another glance at either of us. The instant his back was turned, Priya let go of my hand like it had caught fire, stepped away, and pressed both palms against her own face. "Oh my God," she said into her hands. "Oh my God, I am so sorry." "You want to explain that?" I asked. "Because right now I have been your boyfriend for approximately 90 seconds, and I already know more about our relationship than I know about my own life." She dropped her hands and looked at me with an expression somewhere between embarrassment and pure exhaustion. "He's my ex," she said. We dated for a year before he transferred here. It ended badly. He has spent every company event since telling everyone I'm still hung up on him. I panicked. You were standing there. I am so sorry. I will explain everything. I will buy you an actual drink. Just please don't tell anyone what just happened. I should have walked away right there. Any reasonable man would have finished his shrimp, nodded politely, and gone home to forget the entire encounter by morning. Instead, I heard myself say, "One drink. And you're explaining the whole thing." She exhaled like she had been holding her breath since October. Deal. We found a corner table away from the DJ and over 2 badly poured glasses of wine. Priya told me the real story. Connor had not just been a bad breakup. He had been the kind of boyfriend who slowly convinced her that her opinions were inconvenient and her friendships were suspicious, the kind who made staying feel easier than the fight it would take to leave, until one day the fight became unavoidable anyway. When his transfer landed him 1 floor above her at Rayfield, he had made it his personal mission to remind everyone, subtly and constantly, that Priya was somehow still available, still recovering, still his in some lingering way that made new male coworkers quietly back off before they even tried. "He's not violent," she said, turning her wine glass in slow circles. "He's just relentless. He wears people down until it's easier to believe him than argue. I've spent a year watching him tell the story of us in a way that makes me sound fragile. Tonight, I just couldn't do it again. I saw you standing there, and some part of my brain apparently decided grabbing a random man was a better plan than another conversation with him. Glad to be useful," I said, and that got the first real laugh out of her all night, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she gave it permission. That should have been the end of it. One strange night, one favor, one story to tell at lunch for a week, and then forget. Except 2 days later, Priya knocked on the wall of my cubicle holding 2 coffees, and set one down in front of me without asking. "Connor's already been asking around," she said. "People are curious about my mystery boyfriend. I might need you to exist a little longer." I looked up at her. "How much longer?" "Just through the regional conference in January," she said. "He's presenting. He's going to be insufferable regardless, but if he thinks I've moved on, he leaves me alone faster. That's how he works. He loses interest the second the story stops being about him winning." I should have said no. I had every reasonable excuse ready. Instead, I said, "What's the going rate for fake boyfriend work these days?" She smiled over the rim of her coffee cup. "Lunch. For a month. My treat." That was how it started, small and transactional. 2 coworkers agreeing to a lie because the lie was easier than the truth Connor kept trying to rewrite. We built the story carefully. Met at a mutual friend's barbecue. She told anyone who asked, which required inventing a mutual friend neither of us had. Bonded over a shared love of terrible horror movies, which turned out to be accidentally true once we actually watched one together to keep our cover consistent, and ended up arguing for 40 minutes afterward about whether the ending made any sense. What surprised me was how easy the lunches became. What was supposed to be 1 month of maintaining a story turned into me genuinely looking forward to the sound of her chair rolling back at exactly 12:15. She had opinions about everything, sharp and specific, and she delivered them with a dry certainty that made me laugh before I even understood why it was funny. She remembered that I took my coffee black on weekdays and sweet on weekends, a detail I had mentioned exactly once. I started noticing the way she chewed the end of her pen when she was concentrating, the way she said my actual name instead of babe the second we were alone, like she was giving something small back to me that the performance had taken. The conference came in January, and Connor was exactly as insufferable as promised, presenting quarterly numbers with the confidence of a man who believed everyone in the room admired him. He found us during the networking hour afterward, drink in hand, smile already arranged. Still going strong, he said, looking at where my hand rested at the small of Priya's back, a habit that had stopped feeling performed weeks earlier without either of us discussing it. 3 months turned into what now, 5? Something like that, I said, before Priya could answer, and I felt her glance at me with something unreadable. Connor's smile thinned at the edges. You know she does this, he said, lowering his voice like he was doing me a kindness. Find someone convenient, right, when she needs an exit. Don't get too attached, man. It never lasts. I felt Priya go rigid beside me, and I understood in that second exactly what she had meant on the very first night. About him wearing people down until his version of events felt truer than their own memory of it. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Funny, I said, because from where I'm standing, the only person here who needed an exit was her, and she found one without you a long time ago. Connor's jaw tightened. He looked at Priya, waiting for her to soften it, to apologize on my behalf the way she might have once. She did not. She stepped half a pace closer to me instead and said, "We're done here, Connor," in a voice that did not shake at all. He left without another word, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then Priya turned to me in the noisy hallway outside the conference room and said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." She studied my face like she was looking for the scene where the performance ended and something real began, and I let her look, because I had stopped being able to tell the difference myself weeks ago. "Ethan," she said slowly, "is this still pretend?" I thought about the coffee she brought me without asking. I thought about 40 minutes of arguing over a movie ending neither of us actually cared about, just to keep talking. I thought about the sound of her chair at 12:15 every day, and how much smaller my lunch hour felt on the one day she had a doctor's appointment and couldn't make it. "No," I said. "It stopped being pretend somewhere around the second fake date, if I'm honest. I just didn't know how to bring it up without ruining the arrangement." Something shifted in her expression, relief and nerves tangled together. "I was scared to say it first," she admitted. "I figured if I said it out loud, you'd remember this was supposed to be a favor and back out." "I never once thought of it as a favor," I said. "Not after that first lunch." She laughed, a little unsteady, and reached for my hand the same way she had that first night in the ballroom. Except this time nobody was watching, and there was no line to sell, no performance to protect. "So what happens now?" she asked. "We just tell people the truth?" "We tell people the truth," I said, slowly, "and enjoy watching Connor try to figure out what changed." 6 months later, we did not need a mutual friend's imaginary barbecue to explain how we met, because the real story had somehow become the better one anyway. People at the office still bring up that holiday party sometimes, the way Priya grabbed a near stranger's hand and turned him into her boyfriend on the spot, and I always tell them the same thing. Best decision either of us ever pretended to make. Would you have played along if a coworker grabbed your hand and whispered a favor like that? Do you think Connor ever figured out the truth, or is he still telling people his version of the story? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. If this one hit for you, hit like, subscribe for more stories just like it, and send it to somebody who needs a reminder that sometimes the best relationships start as the worst possible plan. I'll see you in the next one.